Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is my 5th term. When I came, we were $8 trillion and change in debt. 07, it's doubled. I think we're going broke. It's not a matter if, it's a matter when, unless we change what we're doing. You mentioned, Mr. Edwards, about having a standard. I think that standard is a constitutional balanced budget amendment like 49 out of 50 states have. I think all this other stuff is gimmicks. If you look back on some of these slides, over 50 years, we balanced the budget 5 times. But Florida balances the budget every year. They make the tough choices. They had a lot less revenues in 2009, 10, 11. They made the adjustments. And it's booming again. So I think you could set, if you don't have a standard, this is the only place on the planet. I was in business 40 years. I see what happens with leveraged transactions. At some point, it works if everything continues going this way. But as soon as it slides the other way, you could end up in bankruptcy. I was born in Detroit, a great city, still a good city, but it's in bankruptcy. So I see clearly, in my mind, that we're heading down that road if we don't change things. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We're going to have another 2008 at some point. And I'm an optimist. I've created 5,000 jobs or 4,000 jobs over the years. I want to make a difference. I came up here. My reason for running was I thought we were overspending back then. And now we've gone from 8 trillion to 17 trillion in debt. So I guess my question is to all of you, really, and I'll start with the Senator, your thoughts. You've got a balanced budget amendment. Let's say you had no amendment. Any standard would do. What would happen in your state?
I think we'd probably be in the same situation the federal government's in. Obviously, it's easier to hand out candy than it is to tell people they're not going to get everything they want. But our restrictions put us in the situation where we have to be fiscally responsible, and we are. Mr. McDermott mentioned the idea that we have supplemental budgets every year, and that's true. You can't anticipate everything. But when we fund our supplemental budget, it comes at the expense of existing programs in that current fiscal year. So we don't borrow money to deal with the unanticipated circumstances. We cut from things that are already appropriated to fund those so that we stay in balance.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Edwards, you mentioned the idea of having a standard. And I'm all for standards, but everybody up here's got a standard. And if you look over 50 years, there's plenty of blame to go around on both sides. But the reality, many of these budgets, it's a joke. I've been in business a long time. I'm pretty good with numbers. I don't like the way we do business up here. I think we're, as one of my colleagues said, it's immoral what we're passing on to our kids and our grandkids. I have a granddaughter and a grandson pretty soon, and I feel horrible about what's taking place up here. So I think, Mr. Edwards, why isn't a constitutional balanced budget a good thing like 49 out of 50 governors have?
You're absolutely right. James Madison was a genius, and the other founders, but the one piece they missed was the balanced budget requirement. In my written testimony, I have, a quote. Thomas Jefferson strongly believed that was the piece missing from the Constitution, was a balanced budget requirement. And you're right. A lot of the states put their limits in the 19th century, and they put debt limits in because a lot of the states got into trouble spending on wasteful things that went bankrupt, so they reform their institutions, and we need to reform.
I've only got a limited time. Dr. Taylor, and I'll give Mr. Bernstein a chance. But Dr. Taylor first. Why isn't, when you look at the way we do business up here the last 50 years, 49 out of 50 governors have a balanced budget amendment requirement. Why doesn't that make sense, or does it make sense for Congress?
I think some goal like that makes sense. I prefer the one where you control the spending side, caps on spending or caps relative to GDP.
It's just not going to happen. I'm just telling you.
Well, is a balanced budget going to happen?
I think a balanced budget amendment makes a lot of sense. Dr. Bernstein, I know you probably have.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate your giving me a second, and I'll be very quick. Two things. One, I think that a balanced budget amendment or a spending cap is too inflexible given the comments I made in my testimony. We can argue about that. But I think you've made a very impassioned plea, and I hear you, and I feel you, as the kids say. But I want to ask you a question. How is what you just said, and again, it sounded very heartfelt, consistent with the repealing, the estate tax at a cost of $270 billion over 10 years, or the extenders without offsets? How is that consistent? $570 billion.
Let me go to your point. We need to, on both sides, look at the spending and the revenue side, but at the end of the day, we don't spend more than we take in. And that could be just one point of many that needs to be considered. But why don't we have, as 49 out of 50 states have, and they're required, a balanced budget?
Gentleman's
That's the
time
only thing I think that works here in Congress.
has expired, and Dr. Bernstein deserves kudos for turning the questioning around from the dais to the